This changes everything for the Toronto Maple Leafs as we are now just days away from the trade deadline. Multiple new reports have dropped, revealing some huge details as it pertains to the Leafs and Brad Treliving's trade deadline plans. We're going to break down these reports and discuss what it means going forward, as it has major implications for the next few days and even the coming hours. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, but before we get into it, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, about 71% of you who are watching right now aren't, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your guys' support has been fantastic. And a quick note, we will be live following tonight's game as well, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But Darius, there's a lot to go over today. Obviously, the Leafs are in a very interesting spot as the deadline approaches. A lot of teams right now are kind of hovering in the middle between buyers and sellers, but the Leafs, according to multiple reports, are eyeing a lot of different players, and we're going to dive right into it here. So you can see here, this is from Chris Johnson. There's a bunch of different reports coming out, but we'll see this here from Pierre LeBrun, sorry. And all of them. New for the Athletic with Pierre LeBrun. What we're hearing about the Leafs ahead of the trade deadline. And obviously today is the Monday, and the trade deadline is just in a few days. So surrounding the Leafs, we'll dive into this here. It's nearly decision time after a months-long pursuit of a third-line center. The Leafs have looked at Braden Shen in St. Louis and Scott Laughton in Philadelphia, while also keeping tabs on Jake Evans, Yanni Gordon, Nick Bjugstad. Meanwhile, GM Brad Treliving is also hoping to procure another depth defenseman who can play at the right side. A tight cap situation looms over every decision in Toronto, which is why Treliving is likely to seek salary retention from any seller and or use another team as a third-party broker to make the money work. So Darius, a lot of different things here. Pretty big info as it pertains to their actual. We finally got, again, this usually happens the week of the deadline. You start to hear some, inside scoop of actually what their plans are. So it seems like a third-line center at this juncture is going to be the move that they make. Maybe not one of the higher-end players like we had thought initially. It's pretty good news, though.
Yeah, a lot was going on last week, and I think the Leafs were kicking tires on a lot of different players, including Braden Shen, obviously, Scott Laughton, and even Mikko Rantanen to a degree. And we still don't know what's going to happen with Mikko Rantanen. I think he could still actually be on the move, but that's going to be interesting to watch over the next 24, 48 hours or so, because he's going to have a decision. But anyway, I think what's most likely for the Leafs right now is something that's going to be probably very underwhelming for fans, which is funny considering everything that's happened the last couple of days, because I do not believe that the Leafs are going to go out and get Braden Shen for $6.5 million. It just doesn't work. It simply does not work. And if the Blues are going to retain salary on that deal, they're going to want a lot. Like we heard what the package is supposedly going to be and what St. Louis wants. It's too much. And then when you look at Scott Laughton, it's also a bit too much, right? Or it really depends if you want to make that move, how much help you want at third line center. I think he would really help, and he has term, so it's something to consider. Of course, I don't think that they're writing it off right away, but I think that a guy we've kind of forgotten about, and I wanted to bring him up in this video too, is Nick Bjugstad, right? That it doesn't make a lot of money. It could be a bit underwhelming for Leafs fans to a degree, but there's a lot of options that they're looking at, and I don't think Jake Evans is going to come to Toronto either. He plays for the Montreal Canadiens, right? So I don't think that they want to make that trade in division, but Nick Bjugstad's an interesting option. He's a big center that can get the job done in the playoffs, and he's not, a huge name that can play second line center, but it's going to be interesting to see what Treliving has up the sleeve, because by all accounts, yesterday what he said a bunch of nothing really, but at the same time, he said like, they're not really sure if they want to spend some of these assets for a rental.
Yeah, especially because the prices are extremely high. Again, you can see here, they're looking for any of the teams they're trading with to, of course, retain some salary. And regarding Braden Shen, a trade for Blues captain Braden Shen is seen as unlikely but not impossible given their push to get back in the playoff race. The obvious pivot for the Leafs would be center Scott Laughton, but the price for him may still be too high, leaving the Leafs to rely on internal moves or smaller, less grand slam moves. And Elliot Freeman came out and said some things about Braden Shen as well. I might cover in a future video. So there's a lot of different things here, and it seems that Braden Shen and Scott Laughton are the two names that keep getting brought up. Of course, Jake Evans, Yanni Gordon, like you mentioned, Nick Bjugstad. You can see Jim Brad Treliving is also looking at another depth defenseman. There's just a lot of moving parts going on here, and as you start to look at some of these guys, we can look at Braden Shen. You mentioned it. It's going to be tough to actually, with the cap hit, to get Braden Shen on the Toronto Maple Leafs. But as it pertains to his fit, I see the fit. We've discussed it in past videos, but it would require some movement, and that would be the best. I mean, it's probably the best player that's realistically available at this juncture for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So to see him name once again thrown out, although unlikely, if they do take a big swing, it would be for him.
Yeah, I think if they're going to take a big swing, it's probably for him, which is a little bit crazy to say because, when you look at him, he's a little bit older. Like he's John Tavares' age and he's not as good as John Tavares. So, as you head 3 years down the line, that could look very ugly if you're not winning a Stanley Cup in that time, which again, I do think that maybe a player like this could get you over the hump, but at the same time, it's not anything that's going to fix a future problem that is coming probably as soon as next year, which is the second line center position. So I don't think I would make this move with the number of years left on the contract. contract, how much salary they're going to have to retain, what you're going to have to give up. I wouldn't make this move. I would consider Scott Lawton, even at the package that they've been talking about, right? Like a first round pick or a prospect of equal value, something like that. Like I would be more leaning to this side. I would rather make this move, and I think he can actually help you at third line center. It could make some sense. You know, he's signed next year too. So that would make more sense to me. But again, I think at the end of the day, they know that they also need a defenseman. We haven't mentioned that in this video. Like they think that they have to go out and get a depth defenseman, which adds to the salary cap. And one thing we also haven't mentioned in this video, Yarncroke is playing tonight, right? Like he's been added to the salary cap as well, like $2 million on the books, where we didn't really think that that was going to happen. So that's kind of changed all of this as well, where they probably can't add as much as they would have liked. Now, on the other side of things, I would like the Leafs to go all in, right? I think that they have a chance to win the Stanley Cup this year with the team that they built in the summer. I think Brad Living did a great job with the defense and the goaltending, all of that, right? And even heading into next year. But at the same time, the team is playing well. And we see it with Winnipeg Jets fans so far this season. The team's playing so well, they actually don't want to add anyone at the deadline, right? I'm not saying to go that route, but it might be okay if they add a few depth pieces to kind of shore up some of the positions and see if the team can get it done. Because at the end of the day, we've been talking about Braden Shen and all this, and I think it would be, fun and fans would get into it if they were to make a big move, and obviously it would help them. But at the end of the day, we all know it's going to fall on the shoulders of the top four, right? Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, and even Morgan Riley to a degree. So I think the goaltending will help them this year, but at the end of the day, no matter who they acquire, it is going to fall on the shoulders of those guys as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone available who could push them over the top if the core four doesn't perform and doesn't play well. And looking at some of the players' stats that we're looking at here, I mean, again, you have Yanni Gourde, a guy we used to talk about a lot more on the channel. He kind of started because of his injury, was kind of tailed back, 16 points in 35 games, having a bit of a down year there. And like you mentioned, of course, Braden Shen, 38 points, 62 games. Like he has the higher upside of a lot of these players, but again, he's 33 years old. He has a big contract, and there's a lot of different things there that at least lend credit to the fact that he might not be the best option for the Toronto Maple Leafs at that salary hit. But ultimately, it's going to be very interesting to see. And Jake Evans, like you mentioned, I covered him in a video. It makes a lot of sense if he wasn't on the Montreal Canadiens, but because he is, it makes the trade, he's at the lowest cap hit out of the guys that we have available. But at the same time, he would be a very solid third line center. It just seems like the price for a lot of these players is outrageous.
Yeah, I think the pricing this year is really what's keeping the Leafs out of all of this. Like if it was like previous years, which every year it is a bit ridiculous, but this year, I mean, Scott Lawton, that return is insane, right? Any other year, it's probably a second round pick, maybe a B prospect or something like that. But anyway, coming into this year, again, I don't think they're trading with the Montreal Canadiens. Jake Evans could fill that role. I think it would actually be a good player there, but I don't see those two teams making a trade. And, again, looking at Nick Bukestad, I said it before when we first mentioned him, when his name was first put out there that, Utah would be willing to trade him. I kind of like that player. He was with the Edmonton Oilers when they went to the conference final a couple of years ago. Right shot. He's a big body. Like I wouldn't mind that. I think that would be a decent option to kind of shore up the third line center spot there, and then it kind of lengthens the lineup from there. You can put guys on the wing. Domi can go back on the wing, right? So it would help in that way. It's not a crazy move, and it's not the move that we've been talking about where, he would take the responsibilities away from Austin Matthews and John Tavares, right? But I think it would help, and I think that he could be a decent player in that position. So that's kind of the guy I'm looking at now based on everything we've heard, because obviously Yarncroke changes things too. But they can make a couple moves. If you move Max Domi, for example, which we've been mentioning, right? He's been the guy who's kind of thrown out there that name that could be most likely to be moved because of his cap hit. Then you free up some more salary cap space. Maybe Yarncroke. I don't think teams would be interested in Yarncroke. We'll see how he plays tonight, but that's another option as well.
Yeah, let us know down below what your thoughts are. A bunch of new reports coming out. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news as a move is definitely inevitable at this point. Hopefully, it's going to be a big one. Thank you guys for watching. See you later.